And what he would do was that he would say, I think I saw $25 on the floor in the locker room in front of their lockers. And they would go, they knew what that meant, and they would go and get the money, and they would have money to buy lunch because, after the football season, the basketball season, or whatever sports you were in, they didn't get fed.
Right.
And I don't want to put all the emphasis on football because all student athletes matter to Pops and myself.
Right.
This is the inaugural podcast, Just Ask Pops. I'm here with Pam Scott, who was married to Pops for how many years?
32 years.
32 years.
And 3 bonus years. So we were together 35.
What's a bonus year?
3 bonus years were years that we dated and lived together.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense.
Some of them would have problems at home because, as it is, especially with the football NCAA. Well, my recollection, the athletic department is broken up into 2 different categories. There is like football, I don't know which category that goes into, basketball, and then there's Olympic sports. Mm-hmm. So quite often the kids that played on football, of course, were mostly, the majority of the kids were black kids from the inner city. Mm-hmm. And they would come in with problems, parents, different issues at home, not having enough money. Pops, I ran out of money, and they couldn't call their parents because most of these people were, working class parents who just really, the kids were very fortunate and blessed to have gotten a scholarship to be able to attend USC. Otherwise, they would have never gotten in.
Right.
So he would be faced with that. Pops, I need to go home for the holidays. What am I going to do? I really can't afford to go home. They would be given stipends, as student athletes are, and they wouldn't be able to, manage to get home for the holidays, and they would come to him with that problem. And of course, there's always the problem of academics.
Right.
What am I going to do about this, and blah, 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 and I'm not passing this, and that's the, passing the grades that I need. I want to make sure I don't lose my scholarship. And they would come with him with those kind of problems, and how Pops would handle those. Number one was a financial problem, is that he would quite often, and I can name some very, very, very famous star athletes who often were given lunch by Pops. And what he would do was that he would say, I think I saw $25 on the floor in the locker room in front of their lockers. And they would go, they knew what that meant, and they would go and get the money, and they would have money to buy lunch because, after the football season, the basketball season, or whatever sports you were in, they didn't get fed.
Right.
And I don't want to put all the emphasis on football because all student athletes matter to Pops and myself.
Right. So what would you do?
What I do? Okay, in the case of many occasions, on Saturdays, me being that Southern person I am, and I considered myself Mama Scott to many of the student athletes, and I have to say I got a little bit more involved in football only because football season entailed a longer period of there's spring practice, and then there's the prelude of getting ready for the season was much longer than other sports.
Right.
So I would go over, I worked downtown, and sometimes I would pop up, right up the street. I worked at Figueroa at 8th, and Pops was at Figueroa, and where's USC at?
37?
30, yeah. So right up the street, down the street, I should say, I worked, and I could just pop up, take the dash, and go and have lunch and hang out at the school. And I was able to engage with the athletes. And also, we as the wives of the directors and the coaches got to travel to a game during the season, and also to any bowl game. The families were, at that point were involved, and we could travel. So I got to have a little more hands-on with the football, athletes because of that reason.
Right.
So how Pops would handle that, and I would cook quite often on Sundays, and I would take my car. I never took Pops' car because I would cook food.
What'd you make?
I'd make different things. Sometimes I'd make beef. I would make like roast beef. And I would do a lot of soul food because most of the kids, student athletes, in baseball also I should say. Well, I would make Louisiana food, jambalaya, because I'm from New Orleans, from Nala, and I would make different desserts, southern desserts. I would often make banana pudding.
You
got
to make that for me. That's my favorite. That's my favorite.
I love banana pudding also.
Yeah.
So I would cook different variations of food. So I would do a combination of Creole Cajun food and some southern food and put it in the trunk of my car. And I'm telling you, I will never forget this. There was several kids that were living on Adams, and there's some apartments there. And they would all meet up over there, and the baseball kids lived in the same apartment complex with them. And I would drop food off, different, variations of varieties of foods off to them once a month, and on Sundays. And they would come and get food and have a home-cooked meal.
I bet they love that.
They loved it. And there were instances, I can remember with girls' basketball. David was a stickler for women being groomed. And I can remember he would call me up. He goes, sweetie. What, sweetie? I need to run over to the credit union. So-and-so needs to get her hair done for this weekend. What do you think? I said, sweetie, I'm going to say yeah. Okay. I'm going. He would jump in his little Popsmobile that was actually donated to him.
It was a golf cart.
A golf cart that was all diddied up. He had his chrome wheels and music.
It was, and we would laugh when we'd see him coming. We would just laugh. We were like, here comes Pops.
Here comes Pop. And he would go to the credit union to get money for these girls to get.
How did you afford that?
Well, we just did it. When you're doing that old cliche, there's no good deed goes, well, they say bad deed goes unpunished, but I reverse that. There's no good deed that's not rewarded. We just did it. We didn't have kids.
Right.
So we just looked at it as though we were sewing into kids, and they were our kids. And it didn't matter. But see, on the flip side of that, with dealing with student athletes, you also have, especially in water polo and other different sports, and particularly the Olympic sports, you would have kids that came from very wealthy white communities.
The students in my classes are all from wealthy white communities.
Yes, but Pops dealt with the playing field was leveled all across. It didn't matter to him because he was there to be a mentor. They, on the other hand, would have different problems. Money wasn't a problem with them, but they would have problems with their parents, academic problems as well. Just because you have money don't mean that you really want to study, and be a productive student. So he would have to mentor them through that. They would have girlfriend problems, other problems that come along with having girlfriends that you need doctors for. So,
yeah.
So he would have to call some of the doctors on the sly and say, yada, 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 and you got to keep this under wraps kind of thing.
Right. But so-and-so needs your help.
Yes, like yesterday kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So he served as that go-to person for student athletes. As a matter of fact, after Pops passed away, I was traveling to NOLA to visit my family because I just wanted to get away for Easter. And I ran into this young lady. She and I were standing in line waiting to do the TSA check. And she and I struck up a conversation. I love people and I love to talk, as you probably have already discovered.
That's why we're doing the podcast, yeah.
And she and I just struck up a conversation. We just started chatting away. And so when we went through the TSA check, and after I had boarded my flight, I sat down, of course, and a few minutes later, here comes this young lady who I was chatting up with in the TSA check line. She sat next to me. Well, you know what? That was divine connection. That was a divine thing. It was meant to be. So she asked me, she goes, oh, wow, you're going down to New Orleans? I said, yeah, I'm going to New Orleans, visit my family. My sweetie passed away. I said, I wish you would have had the opportunity to meet him. He was a wonderful person, and I was just raving, about Pops and how he was a kind, loving, giving person. And she said, "Oh, really?" She said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And then she and I started talking, and I said, "Well, where did you attend school? What brought you from?" She had come from Oklahoma here. She goes, "Oh, I came here to play tennis." And I was like, "Oh, really? Really? What school did you attend?" She said, "Oh, I attended USC." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Oh, my God." I said, "Really?" I said, "So, did you know Pops?" She goes, "Did I know Pops? Do you know how many times I had to go and sit in his office to vent about different things that were going on?" She said, within, being a student athlete, and she said being a female student athlete, because once again, we know what is king, cotton, football.
Mm-hmm.
So she would go into vent about that, and she was like, You're saying was. She said, "Pops passed away?" I said, "Yes, he did, dear." She screamed. She was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that. Nobody told me. Yada, yada, yada." She said, Pops was everything that you said and some. So that was a blessing for me, because I was in a very, very deep and dark mourning at that point, because David and I really were inseparable. And I really, to be honest, I really did not, after Pops passed away, every day was a milestone for me, because I really didn't want to live without him.
Mm-hmm.
That's how, and I'm getting a little emotional with thinking.
That's okay.
That's how in depth our relationship was, because he wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
He was my confidant, my best friend that I shared with whomever, because when you have such a beautiful gift as him, his kindness and his love and his wisdom, he was very wise in so many different ways. If you're not selfish, and we all have a certain level of selfishness about us, but I wanted everyone that needed him, because I knew it was a gift God had given him to be able to share his goodness with others, and he did.
How did you find out he had passed away?
I was at the hospital.
Because he had gotten sick?
He had actually, the night before, he called me, goes, "Sweetie," he goes, "I'm doing better." I talked to the nurse. This was like about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because when he was in the hospital, we talked to each other all night. He was in ICU, and the reason he had gotten put in ICU is that, the beginning of how he got in the hospital, he'd had some issues that were with his feet, and they were like, I would look at him, because I observed everything about him. I was just that helpmate. As the Bible describes husband and wife, that's what David and I were for each other. And every little thing about him that was different, I noticed, and I was like, "Sweetie, your feet look a little dark." Well, he used to like to sit out in the sun. So I thought it was from him at first sitting in the sun and his feet being exposed, directly in the sun. And he would go out around noon, which is the warmest, part of the day, between noon and 2 o'clock, and sit in the sun under the gazebo. So, and one day I said, "Well, sweetie, I don't know." And he kept this a very deep secret amongst most people. Some of the doctors, the team doctors, knew that he was on dialysis. And
Is this for kidneys or liver?
For his kidneys.
Kidneys.
Yes. He went to dialysis 3 times a week, and which he was doing very well with. His numbers were always good. They're always concerned about numbers when it comes to dialysis. He got really good lab reports, because I followed a renal diet to the T, and every now and then I would allow him to have something that was on that diet that was excluded from that diet. I would let him have it, of course. And the unfortunate part about it is things that are very healthy, that we see as very healthy. There's a very restricted diet, but we made the best of it, and he did very well. But he was having some issues with his circulation. And I think so. He had gone to dialysis that Monday, and his doctor, who, by the way, was Dr. Earlbaum, and he was his renal doctor. he suggested that he go and get an ultrasound on his feet, just to make sure his circulation was good.
No, that's okay.
He suggested that he would, go and get this ultrasound. So that Monday we did, and
he had to stay?
What happened is that they were like, well, your blood pressure's running a little low, and they had been for a while. There's hypo blood pressure, hyper blood pressure, and there's ultra blood pressure, which means running low. So they said, maybe we should just keep you and, just watch your blood pressure, blah, blah. Well, that Friday night, I came and he had also began to have edema. And it was from one of the medications that they had given him to stimulate his blood pressure to become higher. Because it was like 99 over 50, that was pretty low. And so he went to the hospital that Monday, and they kept him, and he was doing good that Friday. Well, that Friday, I went home. He goes, sweetie, please go home. He was always concerned about me. Get some rest. I said, I'll be back in the morning. And they were going to do this test where one of the reasons he was there to do this test to see if he had circulation in his, going out properly through his feet and ankles and legs or whatever. Now, the upper extremities, we knew from the vascular doctor were really good. He was going to test the lower part. One of the things that they said that would have happened if he wasn't having good circulation, that he would have to have an amputee. That went there. And I think that really was a turning point for him, even though that wasn't a fact. He had gone through so many health challenges that, my husband was a very vain man. And I must admit, he inherited it from his mom. So he was very vain. And I get it. He had gone through this very vibrant person that traveled, that was, was a mentor and, not just to student athletes, but to people, individually. And he loved it. So that would have been a real game changer for him. He was a very independent person. And so he had become even more dependent on me over the years since he started dialysis. He drove, but he never really liked driving, so that was an excuse. He used it as an excuse. He didn't want to drive. Every now and then he would drive. So, anyways, we would he was there in the hospital. So I left the hospital that Friday night. He said, I'll see you in the morning. So I called and he goes, sweetie. He was a little out of it, like delirious. He goes, I want you to come. His doctor, he named the doctor. He was here earlier, and they're going to do the procedure today. Well, Lord and behold, he was there, but they weren't going to. This is a Saturday, the 25th of February. They don't do procedures in hospitals on Saturday unless it's a life-threatening thing, that kind of procedure. So he says, well, you better come because you're going to miss it. And I wanted to be there. So I got there, the hospital around maybe 10:30, 11. And when I got there, all of a sudden, I was there a couple of minutes. They said he wasn't doing well. He goes, no. He told me, he said, sweetie, I don't feel good. Get the nurse. And they went and got the nurse.
This is USC Hospital?
No, we were at Little Company of Mary.
Oh, Little Company, okay.
And I went and got the nurse. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, it was cold blue.
Oh, my gosh.
And they were able to resuscitate him a couple times, but he was not stabilized. Then I came in. She came out, and she was like, he's gone. I said, no, he can't be. So I went in, and I tried to resuscitate him.
Oh, that had to be hard.
Oh, my God. It was. All I could see was my baby lying there. But I was able to get him to resuscitate but not stabilize. And I had to just finally, I said, Lord, it's up. He's gone. He has had an encounter with you. And at this point, I think the fact that he had, I think he was hiding some things from me about his heart, because his heart infraction was low. It was 30, and the heart infraction for normal is 70. So he kind of hid that from me, and I think some of the reasons his heart was deteriorated to the degree that it did was because he needed to have a knee replacement, and he wasn't as active as he had been.
Mm-hmm.
He used to ride his bike, stationary bike, and he was always working,
Mm-hmm.
And then the dialysis kind of added to that too. And that he passed away while I was there standing watching
Wow.
him.
Wow.
But you know what? I have found peace in that because Sweetie lived. He was born in 49, and he would have been 74 the year that he passed away in 23. And I know that my husband lived a very fulfilling life, and he was able to bless so many people with his life, with the love that he shared, with his wisdom, with just who he was. And these are things that I always say he was a perfect husband for me. And he really was. He was a perfect son for his mom. His mom passed away a couple of years prior to him, and she lived well into her 90s, early 90s. And he was that kind of person. And as my dear friend who spoke at his service said, he made you feel as though that you were the only person that he was concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
That because he gave his undivided attention and love toward that.
So how did you get through all that and planning the service and everything else that was...
Well, I kind of sort of just knew that I had to do this. I knew that USC had become very much so a part of his life, and I knew I had to plan it around something with, that included USC, because that was his family, He didn't attend USC as, undergrad or grad student or anything, but he had become I like to say, and I can quote this, Mike Garrett told him that he was a legend in his own lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And a legend in a good way. I don't want to sound arrogant and pompous.
No, you don't.
Because quite often people do. There's an old gospel song that says, "May the work I do show for me," and his work did.
It did.
It did. It helped so many different people in so many different ways to keep them. I mean, we would get phone calls in the middle of the night from DPS, Chief of Police. "Pops, we have a student athlete over here. We don't want it to hit the press. We need you to come over here and help us out."
And he would?
And he would get up in the middle of the night, drive over to campus.
That's a lot of work.
A lot of work. He wore that position on his heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for it because it makes me feel good that I know that my husband's life and was rewarding, and it was it did a lot for others because people did for him,
Mm-hmm.
And I refer back to the Bible quite often because it's a good point for me in my life, and there's a scripture that says, the very thing that a man sowed in the book of Psalms, that shall you reap. So he sowed goodness, and he reaped goodness as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Yeah, I remember him. He called me. I think I told you this before. When Stephon Johnson dropped the weight on his throat and it almost killed him. And he had to go through all this rehab, and his mom was a mess, Kim, and his dad was around, but
right.
Stan, but he wasn't really involved. But they came to the hospital, and Pops called me and said, "We had an accident, and you should get over to the hospital," whatever hospital it was, the one downtown.
Yes,
I forget.
LA hospital.
Yeah,
or
something like that. And that's when I went in and saw Stephon. And I didn't see him, but I saw Kim and his dad. And we got Kim and his dad. They did interviews with me, and we did the whole story. But I mean, I would never have known if it wasn't for Pops, who had called me. He cared enough about me and my job, even though I was a member of the press.
Right.
But I love Stephon. He went to Dorsey. He was a great kid, and he's doing really well now. He's a coach. at Dorsey.
He is.
Yeah.
He is doing very well.
Yeah. And I just heard from Kim. They've got like, how many kids do they have?
4. She has 4 beautiful grandkids.
And they're all Stephans?
And they're all Stephans. That's her only child. She just sent me something encouraging this morning. And she doesn't know we're doing this.
No, she doesn't?
She doesn't know. I'll tell her later on today. Right. Yes.
Yeah, and I see Stefan, and he wants to be involved, and he wants to come on, and he wants to do all this. So it's connections are a great way to get to know people and get to know other people around. Yeah. And that's what has sustained me in my career. And Pops was a big part of that. You know, he loved me, and he loved what we talked about and goofed around. And I used to go into the horrible place where he was his office, and he would give us, I know. He would give us T-shirts and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, I'm not going to wear a USC T-shirt. I went to Nebraska. And he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. So, but he treated our camera crews and producers, anybody who I brought along. He was so nice to them and so grateful that we were doing what we were doing.
Yes.
For him and USC. So, how did you move on from there?
Well, I have a really great support. It's really, I call them my clusters. And the reason I have categorized it as such is because they come from different parts of my life. So I have my USC family, and by the way, Pops was indoctrinated this summer. He received
you got something, yeah, I remember seeing that.
I have the award here. I have to always read. I can never pronounce this name correctly.
That's all right.
He received this award this summer.
Oh, that's it?
That's it.
Oh, it's beautiful. Marv Goo.
The Marv Goo. There you go.
There you go.
So
you don't want to say gout.
Officially a Trojan.
A Trojan for life.
A Trojan for life.
The clock doesn't work, though.
I haven't put the battery in.
It's a beautiful clock. And a beautiful...
I'm going to put it up in this office. I'm going to review some things and put it up. So, he received that award, and I went to that this summer at Salute to Troy, which is the beginning of football season officially, and accepted this award for Pops. And it just really warmed. So I had my USC family that constantly checked on me, you know, and then I have my sister girls, I like to call them, a group that just rallied around me and helped me get through this. As a matter of fact, Kim, Stefan's mom, literally stayed here with me for the first 2 months.
Wow.
Every other night, she would come and spend the night with me.
She's amazing.
She is amazing. She says, Pam, are you kidding me? As good as Pops was to me and Stefan, and I like to cook, so I could never make enough food for just too little amount of food for just Pops and I. So I would cook all this enormous amount of food, and she would always, you know, you better come by and get some food. I have, you know, whatever. So I enjoy cooking.
Yeah.
And so she would stay here with me like for 2 months. And finally, one day I told her, I said, you know what, Kim, I have got to learn to live with this. You know, you have your life. And I appreciate all, you know, that you've done for me and being here for me, you know, but I've got to learn to live here by myself. I'd never lived alone, to be honest, and that was quite different for me. And so what I did, she stayed here with me. Then I traveled probably from the time Pops passed away in February of 23. I know I went to New Orleans at least 4 times. My godson worked for the airline, so he used to give me, you know, passes to travel. And I have, just to share the uniqueness of Pops, because I'm going that way. I went to Princeton and stayed about a month in the summer, and then I went to Texas, and then I went to Florida. I mean, I traveled because I didn't want to be here in the house without Pops. But prior to Pops and I meeting, when I moved here from New Orleans, I was actually married. And I went through a divorce with him, with someone I met in college. And we met and got married, blah, 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 blah. And but his family, I had known them since I was in high school. So his family was very connected to me. And when Pops and I got together, I had to explain to him, now, I have to explain this to you. My ex, who he knew of but did not know him, family and I are very close. We're family because I didn't have a lot of family. My mom passed away when I was like a freshman in college.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had been gone for many years since I was a very young kid. And my grandparents, this is my family. Not extended, this is my family. So he accepted them. And he loved them. And they loved him. And they were at his service. They came from New Orleans. Some came from New Jersey. My ex's dad, the only reason he was not at David's, he loved David and David loved him, was because he had eye surgery and he couldn't travel.
Right, couldn't fly.
But we were all one big happy family,
Mm-hmm.
minus, my ex, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I wouldn't have invited him.
No, I didn't invite him, of course. But Pops loved them.
Yeah.
And they loved Pops. They were in our wedding. I don't know what more to say. But that's how much he loved people. Once he saw the genuineness with them, he knew that they were not my sister-in-laws, but my sisters. Not my father-in-law, but really my father.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So we became one big family, and David loved them, and they loved David, and that's just the way life went.
So you traveled around and saw family, and they gave you strength?
They gave me strength. They encouraged me. They gave me strength, and just loved on me. What they knew that David would have done for them if they were in that same, position. And so that helped me to get through it. And I have to also give my kudos to my spiritual side also. My friends and family that were involved and believed in the word and, the believers, they helped me through this with prayer and support. And to my Father in heaven, God, I have to.
And you've made it. You've made it.
Yes.
And now I'm not saying you're happier, but you're happy.
Yes. My sister just told me that the other day. She says she lives in Louisiana, right outside New Orleans. She goes, sis, I could tell that she said the word she used was joy. She said, because happiness is predicated on events and things. She said, I can still hear that you have joy in your heart.
Yes.
And I do, because David would want me to live. I quite often would tell him, sweetie, if I go before you, because one of those days we're all going to get that number, I said, I want you to just go on with life and enjoy, your life and live. I want that for you, And he would just look at me kind of stoic, like, yeah, right, sweetie.
Whatever you say.
Whatever you say kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. And his legacy is going to live on forever, I think.
Forever, yes. That's my point.
That's where we're doing this now.
Yes.
And I might write something as well, because that's what I do. I can't just do one thing at a time.
Oh, no.
No.
You would be a woman if you did that.
I know, exactly. Exactly. And my daughter's gone, and I told her she's getting married in October. So.
Yes, that's the month Sweetie and I got married.
Really?
October 26, 1991.
I'll tell her. She's getting married October 1st, yeah, up in Yucca Valley, which is really nice. So what do you want this podcast to be?
I want this podcast to be, first of all, not just about Pops. I want this podcast to be about people doing what Pops would have wanted them to do, what their lives, to be progressive and to be informative and to be a listening ear, to discuss topics and things that they would have wanted to discuss with him, but he's not here now. David and I were, very much, we'd had the same thoughts sometimes. I was like, sweetie, I can't believe you. I was just thinking about that. So we shared a lot of things that some things, of course, you don't know everything a person thinks and how to react, but a lot of things I do know how he would respond to. And for it to live on, because you know what? in today's society, as we are right now, 2024, there is a lot of stress in life itself. There's a lot of stress with being a student athlete. There's a lot of stress with those that, and he used to always say this. He says, one of the things that he really truly, the only time Pops visited USC's campus was that he went over, and I have saved that video. It's online, on the internet.
Because they had relieved him of his duties because they were, I don't know if it was because of budget cuts or
of whatever. We still need an answer for it.
Yeah, we do. I don't know why they let him go.
Yeah, a lot of people were very alumni were very upset about that because he really was the pulse.
He was. You should have seen the people at his service. It was jammed. And where was it again? It was in the stadium.
It was at the 1923 clubhouse.
Something, yeah.
At the Coliseum.
And you couldn't find a place to sit, and you had to, and I spoke, which was, it was good enough.
It was wonderful.
But there were so many student athletes there and football players I hadn't seen in years that had showed up. It was a remarkable event.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah,
it was a remarkable event. It was something that I wanted to. It was a memorial. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel like it was. I didn't want to do anything traditional. Who wants to go and do?
No, it wasn't. And you spoke, and it was you were terrific. Yeah.
Yes, I did. I spoke from my heart. And it was a service. Now that we're in that vein of people being able to get up and voice how they felt personally about Pops. It was a forum for that, which is what we needed because I know I was not the only one suffering and hurting. So that was a blessing in itself, and I pulled my strength from that too. That Pops had, he had left his legacy here. And I was very much so very grateful and thankful because, quite often, you pass away and you're forgotten. Mm-hmm. Well, I still get phone calls. His phone is still on. I'll never cut that number off. And I still get phone calls from different kids that call in. As a matter of fact, just last night, one of the track young ladies that used to run track, we consider her one of our goddaughters, she came by. I had made some gumbo, and she came by to to have dinner with me last night. Yeah, she's like, "Oh my God, I want to come by and say hi to Shelley," but she has to go in the office today.
Oh, okay. Who?
Tiffany Jones.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Who was the guy who showed up at Pops's funeral who was drunk?
Oh, I knew that was the next step.
I mean, he was a mess.
Brandon. What is Brandon's last name?
Brandon? Oh, I know who it is, but I can't remember his name either.
It's Brandon. Is it Brandon Cox?
Maybe, I don't know.
I think it's Brandon. I have those shoes in the trunk of my car. I've never taken them out.
Oh.
David had given him a pair of dress shoes, and he wore them he needed shoes. He wore them so long that they had a hole in the bottom of them.
Yeah.
And he brought those shoes. Those shoes are in the trunk of my car right now.
He was a fullback, I think, if I remember right. He was a fullback.
Hancock.
Brandon Hancock.
There you go.
You remember that name? Probably not. No. But he was always one of my favorites. And obviously he was one of Pops's too, who gave him the shoes.
He did.
And he brought the shoes to the funeral. We're like, okay, that's different. But we laughed and we had a good time at the funeral.
But see, we also, because of the way the service was set up, you can buy alcohol. It was open. We had lunch and we had a full bar.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
I would have taken part in that.
So see, he probably came sober, and by the time...
No, he said he had been out all night.
Oh, Jesus.
All night and just got up and came over.
Brandon, that's why you were always getting in trouble when we were
I know. He was, and we had him on for the movie that we did and the whole thing. But it was, he was a mess because he had just gotten home.
That's Brandon.
But he admitted it. He said, "I haven't been home."
Yes, he did admit that. Didn't he? Yes, it was so much. I tell you, it was a blessing. It in the midst of all of that, it just it helped me to because David kind of thought that he had been forgotten, and it's like this is how things when you're in a limelight, I would, for lack of a better word. I just attended a service this week of a very well-known actress's grandmother. They're from Louisiana. And, of course, they don't want to be bothered when I won't call her name, but they don't want to be bothered when, they don't want people bothering them. But then when you don't say anything to them, they look stupid.
Right. And then they think, well, everybody's forgotten me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the thing. And so David was like, sweetie, do you think? He wouldn't voice it in that manner. He would say it like, well, the phone didn't ring this week. Well, sweetie, yeah, and then the next week you get 300 phone calls, kind of thing. So, people going on with life. And unfortunately, this generation of Trojans, unless someone, mentions Pops, and I'm sure here and there his name is still being mentioned in the locker room.
It is. I mean, I try to bring it up as much as I can.
And I appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.
And, they don't know him the way the past kids did, not just, and I want to emphasize, not just football, but track,
right?
Track and field, the Olympic sports, tennis and swimming and all those, good things. He was there for them, and they were there for him too, because it blessed him as well. It was a,
back and forth.
Yes, give and receive kind of situation.
Yeah, that's tremendous, and he left such a legacy. That's why we're going to keep it alive.
Yes, we are.
Can you play the piano for us?
Oh my! Well, I'm kind of at the beginning of it, so.
Do you know chopsticks?
No.
Oh, okay,
I'm
never
kind
mind.
of in trouble because I haven't studied it all this week. This will be my second lesson.
All right. Well, we'll give you a couple lessons.
Yes, give me a couple lessons, and then I'll be I can play Mozart for you at that point.
That would be great. My dad is a great piano player, but he can only play in the key of C.
Really?
Yeah. So any song in the key of C,
he had it.
He had it.
Yeah, that has helped me a lot. Oh, and another thing that helped me out since you mentioned that is that I became a member of OLLI, which is a program that's set up at not all but some of the Cal State universities, and then I live here in the great city of Carson, and there's Cal State Dominguez here. And as a matter of fact, I found out about this program. Another thing that helped me cope was I signed up for a grievancing class. So I would go to my bereavement class, counseling sessions, and it was a group session, and that helped me a lot.
I'll bet. It's always good to talk.
Always good to talk. And I met this lady, actually, who's ended up being a sorority sister of mine, and I didn't know it, and she introduced me to OLLI. And I played tennis twice a week, and I joined also a course that we have there. And there are other different classes, and some are educational and some are fun, like the tennis thing that I do. And that helped me out a lot also. The bereavement class and this OLLI program.
And those are very important, and people don't give them enough credit for doing those things.
Yeah, it's awesome. Good. I love it. And it's for people 50 and older, so.
Well, I qualify. Is there one for 60 and older?
Yeah, there's one. And we have couple people that actually are part of my tennis team. I played with them yesterday. Especially William. He's 81 years old.
Oh my gosh.
My God, can he roll? He's no joke on the tennis team.
Oh, that's terrific. We should come watch that.
Yeah, honestly, it's interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, I look forward to jumping into this venture with you and continuing our stories, and that's it for now, I guess, right? Right. So we'll do this again in a couple of weeks.
And we're going to end this with what? Fight on?
Well, you can say it. I'm not going to say it.
Oh, I forgot I have someone here from the Oregon Ducks
and Nebraska.
But I'm a Trojan, so I can say
you can say
fight
fight
on
on
the next time that we talk again.
All right.